All right, the big debate coming out of the combine, Kyler Murray. Do the Arizona Cardinals actually pick him? All the rumors that he's going number 1 overall. I've got a big mock draft coming up, so I want to know too. I need to know the numbers behind what makes sense for the Cardinals. I know we love Kyler Murray, but do we love him enough over Josh Rosen?
Look, I think you need to have the debate. A lot of people don't want to cut, an investment early. It's just not something people like to do, right? It's a sunk cost fallacy.
Right.
Obviously, people do not like to just get rid of it. And based on what we're hearing, there's no way they're going to get a top 10 pick for Josh Rosen. Right now, people are talking about, a 3rd round pick. But if you just think about what is going to make your franchise, what's going to give your franchise the best chance at competing for a Super Bowl over the life of, say, this quarterback's rookie contract, there's no debate that it's Kyler Murray. From an accuracy standpoint, he's head and shoulders above Josh Rosen. From an athleticism standpoint, he's head and shoulders above Josh Rosen. And we saw the Arizona Cardinals last year, he was under pressure over 40% of the time. If you want to have a prayer with that sort of a setup, I think you got to take Kyler Murray.
Yeah, and I think when you look at as you said, looking at it from the perspective of, we already have this quarterback, I think that's an asset that other teams are eventually going to value. And whether that's, it's going to take some guts, for example, for them to take Murray at 1, hold Rosen if they don't like the draft pick, compensation that they could get. But ultimately, we've seen this over and over again. We saw it in 2016 when Minnesota had to go and get Sam Bradford. We saw it, 2017 when Miami had to go into they had to go into the Fox broadcast booth and get Jay Cutler.
Stole Jay Cutler.
Yeah, from us. Yeah, from us. So the thing about it is that asset's going to be valuable. And as George said, Rosen's situation, I think when teams start to maybe explore this idea further, they're going to see, okay, well, we look at our numbers here. Rosen's, if you take the last 2 quarterback drafts, Rosen's still a top 5 prospect among those players in terms of his fundamentals. In an offense like that, he's not good enough to overcome those. But if you're, say, Washington, or you're, say, a team with an otherwise good team with an offensive line that can protect him, I think he'll do better than some of these other guys, especially in this draft where you're looking at Haskins, you're looking at Locke, you're looking at Jones, all those players. I think when folks start to look at them on similar footing, they're going to get a better look into what Rosen really is in terms of a value.
Well, let me ask you this, Steve. So if I said, okay, Josh Rosen's rookie season, what does it remind you of?
Everybody's already comparing it to Jared Goff.
Right.
And what he did in 2016. Terrible situation, terrible output.
From a quarterback standpoint, are the similarities there with the 2 quarterbacks where that's not a ridiculous... From the numbers perspective, it does make sense. Josh Rosen's sort of a poor-ish man's Jared Goff in some respects, and obviously not super mobile.
Yeah, so I think, I tweeted this out recently, I don't think Rosen's value should change at all from where it was a year ago.
Right.
Other than the fact that you, on one hand, lose a year of control, but you also don't have to pay a signing bonus. So nothing changes other than, some of the financials. I still think last year's class, it was Baker Mayfield in a different world, Sam Darnold to the next tier, and then Rosen his own 3rd tier, and I compare him a little bit to a Dwayne Haskins as far as they can make plays within the pocket. They're going to struggle a little bit outside of structure. So my question's really, is the difference between Kyler Murray and Josh Rosen enough? Because it's Josh Rosen plus, say, the 1st overall pick. Yeah. Is it Nick Bosa? Is it Quinnen Williams? Is it a Josh Allen? Or is it Josh Rosen plus what you could get from a trade down? So it could be Josh Rosen plus multiple picks in the 1st round. Yeah. I want to add up all that value and put it side by side with Kyler Murray.
Well, I think with quarterback, you get 2 things. It's not only that a quarterback is more valuable on average than any other pick, it's also the variance is higher as well. So the difference between a quarterback at 1 and the 15th best quarterback or the 5th best quarterback in a draft is so much more substantial than the difference between Nick Bosa and the edge that you can get at 15, for example, or 10, in a trade back. So not only, I think thinking about that is a sound way to think about it in every other circumstance, but when you're foregoing the opportunity to get the best quarterback in a class and possibly the 2nd best quarterback in the last 2 classes, I think that is really what has to go into the calculus. It's not a linear trade. It's, the 15th guy, if he's a defensive end, it's probably going to approximate Nick Bosa far better than somebody like Drew Lock is going to approximate Kyler Murray.
I mean, just look at the last season, right? So MVP, Pat Mahomes, nearly 8 wins above replacement. Aaron Donald was amazing. He was fantastic. An incredible season, maybe his best season by the most dominant defensive player or overall player that we've seen over the past 5 seasons. And he was just above 2 wins above replacement. So the difference between going from a top-tier quarterback, a Pat Mahomes, a Drew Brees, a guy in a situation that can actually do that, and say, you know, an Aaron Donald, that's dropping multiple tiers in terms of quarterbacks. Right. There are quarterbacks in the 3rd and 4th tier that are getting you 2 wins above replacement. So as Eric said, you have to try and be competitive and compete for a Super Bowl, and you're just not going to do that unless you make a large jump. And the only way to do that is with a viable quarterback.
And so there's risk inherent with all of this stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
So how, and a lot of stuff that you guys do that we talk about is about risk and confidence levels and all of that. And it's the right way to approach things. I think too many people get caught up in this black and white evaluation where this guy's good, this guy's bad. But the best stuff that I think we're working on right now is the range of outcomes, which is also dependent on circumstances. So Kyler Murray's range of outcomes. Is it top 8 quarterback? Is him being a top 8 quarterback is that a possibility?
Yeah, there's a significant.
Is that a high possibility?
There's a significant chance he could be in that range for sure. And if you look
versus
at
Rosen being a top 8 quarterback, much lower.
Far less likely. However, there's still that opportunity, as we've seen with Goff, at his best, in the best circumstances, his fundamentals could project into that top range. Murray, I think, his projection's a lot more robust to situations because, as we've talked about in the forecast, as you guys have talked about, quarterbacks that can run, pick up a first down or 2 every game, that quarterbacks that can't don't, and those don't show up in the passing stats, but they are expected points everywhere. They are a floor to a quarterback sort of outcome space that is not necessarily afforded to a guy like Josh Rosen. So I would say Murray's going to be far more robust to situations because pressure is not going to affect him as much as it does Rosen. The fact that he's just more accurate in some sense. His fundamentals are better as well. So I would say I think it's a better than 50% chance he ends up in that sort of upper echelon of the NFL.
And last year at this time we were talking about Lamar Jackson. You can kind of build an offense around him, which they did, which is run game heavy. And how do you mitigate his accuracy issues? You run a ton of play action and use him in the run game. You get more open throws. At the very least, you could do that with Murray. But oh, by the way, he's a much better pocket passer. I mean, at the very least, you could run a system that focuses on his legs a little bit, makes things easier for him. But he's also a fantastic pocket passer. I get.
There's no comparison, right? Yeah. And you look at a guy like Deshaun Watson, I think is interesting because he's sort of in the. Lamar Jackson's like one of the least accurate quarterbacks that we've seen.
Still is. Nothing changed.
And nothing has changed, and was still able to turn a terrible offense into a somewhat viable offense simply by running the ball from the quarterback position. Deshaun Watson was able to open up an offense despite not being that accurate. He was able to make plays, right? His running threat allowed them to do things from an offensive standpoint to force defenses into different looks. Murray is that and more from an athleticism standpoint, but adds the dimension of he's a top 2 really in terms of accurate passing from the quarterback spot. So I just don't think it's even a question. I mean, people are going to talk about the height and the weight. We sat here 2 months ago and said you have to take Kyler Murray number 1. Right? You just have to use the production at the college level, which just so happens to matter a heck of a lot more than
matters way more than everything else we're talking about.
Half an inch and 5 pounds here. I mean, is there ever been a time in the NFL where that mattered less? Certainly not.
All right, so my mock draft, I get to play GM for every single team. I'm taking Kyler Murray. I mean, I was already there. I like to talk it out and hear the exact breakdown. Here's real quick, one more question. If it was Kyler Murray versus Sam Darnold, is that difference big enough that it's still Kyler Murray?
I think Darnold's far more encouraging right now than Rosen, but again, you're Arizona, you're trying to do 2 things. You're trying to build a better roster, but in lieu of that, you're just trying to put a quarterback in there that can overcome all those things. And we've seen that with Indianapolis. We saw that, with Houston. We saw teams that don't have great rosters put that quarterback in there. Kansas City, even at the extreme, one of the worst defenses in the NFL. You put an MVP quarterback in there, and they're contending for a
He
Super
had a
Bowl.
nice offensive system still.
Yeah, right. But
the idea of luck has always elevated Indy's offense.
Yep.
Watson, I mean, the PFF grading with it's Watson and Hopkins and literally nobody else unless Will Fuller's on the field, and
and a terrible offensive line.
Terrible offensive line.
At this time
so there's
last
something
year,
to it.
we were talking about Indianapolis as though they had the worst roster in the NFL, and 12 months later, we're talking about them as probably the favorite to win the AFC South next year. So, those are all things that when you're the Arizona Cardinals, you can, especially if you can get something for that quarterback that you currently hold. In addition to getting Murray, that if they were able to trade, for example, Rosen to pick 15 to Washington, who needs a quarterback with Alex Smith being out, that 15th pick is going to net them a halfway decent offensive lineman in Jonah Williams, Greg Little. Those type of players are going to be there at that spot.
So let's get out of here on this, because I think this is the tricky question. What are you accepting for Rosen pre-draft? Where's the marker for either I'm holding on to him and I'm waiting till someone gets desperate, or I'm shipping him out before the draft happens?
I think you can be patient enough to get a first round pick.
I agree.
You hinted at that earlier. We've discussed this off air before. First off, I think Washington. I think that marriage makes a ton of sense because I don't love Drew Lock. I don't love Daniel Jones. There aren't other quarterbacks that feel great in the middle of the first round.
You have to trade up to get Haskins. You're going to have to pay a huge price to get Haskins.
Right.
What's really the difference between Rosen and Haskins?
I keep putting them in the same tier.
Yep.
Again, because I think they make plays. They make pretty plays from the pocket.
Yep.
Things that probably overrate them a little bit because they throw a nice spiral. They look good, but the outside of the structure stuff, I have questions about. I would love that for Washington, or if maybe even Miami, unless Miami's in super 2-year tank job for Trevor Lawrence, which I don't hate. But I think those teams that can't get a Kyler Murray or a Dwayne Haskins, Rosen makes sense, but I would hold out for that first round pick.
You just put him in one preseason game, let him look decent, all of a sudden first round
Well,
pick.
we saw with Dallas, when they were building their dynasty, they were not afraid to draft Troy Aikman and Steve Walsh in the same draft. One with a supplemental pick. They were both first round picks, and eventually the question always became which one is going to come out. And eventually the Saints were desperate enough to trade a first round pick plus others for Steve Walsh. I mean, this is the quarterback market in the
Historic
NFL. The quarterback market in the NFL. The Vikings traded a first and fourth round pick for Sam Bradford. This is going to be something where the Cardinals are going to have the NFL. I think I think they're going to have the NFL wanting one of their quarterbacks.
I don't think Rosen's value should have changed.
Third rounder. I mean, it's hilarious.
I think it's fake.
Hilarious. All right, first overall,
Kyler Murray
Kyler Murray
to the Cardinals.